Welcome into another edition of the FutureSox RoundUp. We are doing this totally last minute. I just got to Miami for the next couple days from Orlando, driving down from the winter meetings. It has been a crazy week. I'm Elijah Evans, joined by Dylan Barnas. We're pretty excited here in the White Sox world today. It's a pretty big week for this organization. Coming off of winter meetings, I have a ton of stuff I'm going to put to writing on the written side of For Just Baseball. I am going to get a lot of pods out in the next few weeks. We're going to do like a quick rundown tonight of just the draft lottery and the Rule 5, nothing else. Then we'll get into some more off-season stuff, some more deeper analysis of all the conversations I had in Orlando, not Arizona. Talked a lot with, through the press conferences, through everything going on with Chris Getz, with Mike Shirley, with everybody else within the organization, Paul Yanish as well. Some really good stuff happening in the White Sox organization. But first, we got to focus for now, focus up on the draft lottery and the Rule 5 draft. Dylan, the Chicago White Sox won the MLB draft lottery and will be picking first overall in the 2026 MLB draft.
And how fitting was it that the last time the White Sox drafted first overall, Harold Baines was the pick, and he was the guy who was up on stage to receive the envelope from Greg Amsinger. You just couldn't write a better story. Once Harold Baines was the White Sox representative, you knew that everything was going to work out all right. And I'm so glad it did, because the White Sox are going to have a chance at anyone they want. And, we all know who it's probably going to be. But, I mean, the fact that there's two really top-end talents, one on the college side and one on the prep side, the fact that you have a choice between both of those guys is just so great. And on top of that, you get the expanded bonus pool, because the number one pick is obviously the most valuable pick in the entire draft. So you can use some of the money that you save. Let's say they cut him for $500,000 under slot. That's a lot of money that you can then add on to your second rounder, which the White Sox have done that in the past couple of years, where, they try and swing big in the second round. So the increased bonus pool is something that I'm very, very much looking forward to, and just seeing how Mike Shirley navigates all that, because he's done a great job with it the last couple of years.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's the great way to look at it. Before we get into the actual players on the table, right? A couple just instant takeaways, the organization is fired up, man. And that was really cool for me to see. Being at the draft lottery, being in person, watching it go down, I was shaking. I'm still debating if I'm going to post. One of my buddies got a video of my instant reaction in the room. I was a little fired up. I can't lie.
Yeah,
I was excited. I was excited. There was a lot of people in very serious mode. And as much as I'm a serious guy, and as much as I take the journalism I do seriously, I was a little pumped, man. I gotta say, I was hype. I really could not hold back the fact that I was fired up, and I think the organization felt the same way. It was more emotion, frankly, than I've seen out of Chris Getz and Mike Shirley in a little while, honestly, because you could tell this was a big deal. This was something that, like you mentioned, it's not just about the player that goes first overall. There is more to that than just who goes first. There really is a different way you calibrate a draft when you have the largest bonus pool in the entire draft. Not to mention the first pick in the first round and the second pick in the rest of the rounds going forward from the 2nd through the 20th, but the most money to spend of any team in the draft. The White Sox will have the largest bonus pool. There's going to be teams that are close based on their draft staggering and having comp picks as well, but pretty likely the White Sox will have the largest bonus pool, and that gives a lot of creativity. It was very clear talking to Mike Shirley in the post conversation that I asked him specifically kind of, how do you look at this bonus pool, and are you able to then reconsider the way you target in the 2nd through 4th rounds? He particularly pointed out Grant Taylor and Caleb Bonham, because those are two guys that they targeted in the 2nd round as guys who could have been first round talents, right? But because they utilized the money in the pool effectively, they were able to make those deals happen. So he mentioned that kind of those guys were the blueprint of what they want to be able to do. He was saying, maybe there's one of these quotes I love from him. He's like, maybe there's 3 pieces that you absolutely love, and you can stretch your money to be able to get those guys. Players are wanting value, and if you've been given the largest bonus pool, let's execute with that. And that just gives me a lot of confidence in the way they're going to attack this draft. And I do think that there's going to be a very clear aim of utilizing that second pick and treating it like a first round pick, man. You can get a guy and you can find a guy. And I think my guess is if they go the expector route at 1, and we'll get into that next, then they can go the prep route at 2. That's probably my guess. I do think, potentially Tomey, I know people have mentioned Landon Tomey, of course, because of the connection with Jim, but there's a lot of other really talented prep players in this class. And I think that there's a good chance to be able to really take, another step forward here with a, the best, whoever they deem as the best prospect in the draft, and then another top 20 level talent who you can buy down with an extra million of slot value potentially to that hypothetically 42nd pick, I believe will be where they pick in the second round.
Yeah, it's going to be really really fun to see, how how like the middle of the first round goes, because the college class from this year is really good. We've seen it's been on like a 3-year cycle where the college class is just so good because of the 2020 draft where it was only 5 rounds. A lot of the high school seasons got canceled, so a lot of the high school players that would have gotten drafted in 2020 and signed, they made it to campus and played out their full 3 years. And then that made the 2023 draft really college heavy and really strong. And then that in turn made the prep class of 2023. They all got to college. Like the guy that we've all been hyped for, Rock Chalowski, he could have been drafted in 2023, and Mike Shirley seemed like he wanted to draft him in 2023. So it's going to be a really fun year for the White Sox, just draft boards, and I cannot wait until July 12th, 2026.
Yeah, we're going to get into more of this detail, but I first want to shout out. This is a really nice super chat from Emiliano down here. Really appreciate that, man. First of all, we appreciate the support. It's been really fun and an honor to cover the White Sox the past year, and I think we feel really excited about being able to cover this team in 2026 and beyond. So thank you for the chat. First of all, it is interesting to consider the defensive. This will be a whole nother episode, frankly, because the defensive outlook of this team is getting really interesting. And you don't want to get ahead of yourself, right? I don't think you want to get to the place where you're starting to think too deeply about defensive alignment, because at this point, it's talent. You got to accumulate talent. You got to get these guys developed and into your major league roster, and then you can figure this stuff out, or at least up to the upper levels of the minors. Then you can start to do some positional adjustments, see what happens, right? It's interesting. I think there's a lot of ways you can go. Both the guys we're mainly going to talk about in this draft class, regardless if you're talking Chalowski or Grady Emerson, who I do think is worth really seriously
100%.
mentioning here, both are shortstops, right? And both are supposedly going to be plus shortstops. So that's where it gets really fascinating, because you just drafted Billy Carlson, who's projected as a plus shortstop. You have Caleb Bonham, who's still playing shortstop in the minors and doing a good job of it, frankly.
Right.
You got Colson Montgomery, who just showed he can be a big league shortstop. He played 3 months of shortstop in the big leagues and was a plus defender, not just a decent defender, but legitimately a plus defender at shortstop at the big league level. Then you've got the potential draft picks who both would be shortstops. Third base is the easy adjustment for someone, whether it be Colson, and that's been mentioned before, obviously, or whether it be, whether it is Chalowski, whether it is Bonham shifting to third because he's already played some third. Any of those guys can shift to third, too. We just mentioned 4 guys, and there could be more, that even if one shifts to third, that's still 2 spots for four plus players potentially that are all, key pieces of the core. Okay, maybe you mentioned, Colson could be a first option, Bonham in the outfield. There's a lot of ways to angle it. I got to think deeper on it, because I really don't know how that works out. But with that said, right now, talent above all.
Yeah. And, we've seen teams in the past move their athletic middle infielders into the outfield, and they're doing just fine. Look at Jackson Merrill from the Padres. Look at Javi Baez. He got out there and was throwing the glove around in center field for the Tigers this year. Like, there's not a bad thing that you can say about having multiple athletic middle infielders that can play a variety of positions. And, if it comes at the cost of, like, all right, yeah, let's say Caleb Bonham moves into left field and is a 45 defender, like purely average, but then at third base, he would have been a 50. And, Colson Montgomery is over there and he's a 55. So, like, how much do you value, like, very slight defensive changes? But the fact is, the White Sox are going to have a lot of time to figure all this out. And, it wouldn't shock me if we look up in 2027 or 2028 and all 4 of those guys are playing somewhere in the field for the White Sox.
Yeah, it's interesting. To answer another question in the chat, positional logic in the draft, like, I'm not saying never, but very minimally is going to factor into this.
Yeah.
You got to get talent, especially when you're a team that's been, in a losing situation for 3 years in a row like they have been. It's talent. Talent comes above all else. You figure out the positional later. A lot of top picks are shortstops in high school, in college, right? And end up shifting into center field, or they shift to second base, they shift to third base. Some of them shift into a corner outfield. Like, you can adjust defense. You take the talent. And that leads us right into, like, yes, there's a lot of other players in this draft class. And yes, we will discuss it. a lot of people. So I spent the last 3 days talking for 11 hours a day to baseball people, right? And my voice is tired. I'm exhausted, honestly. I am not sure there's been a more consensus top prospect at this point in the year. So 8 months out, we're still 8 months out from the draft. A lot can happen in 8 months. I'm not sure there's been a more consensus top prospect in the draft than Rock Chalowski in quite some time. Even the year you look at Paul Skeens, you're like, how was Paul Skeens? Dylan Cruz was supposed to be the first pick for
Right.
up until literally probably 2 weeks before the draft, when Dylan Cruz was largely considered that. I don't know the last time there was a prospect that 8 months out was viewed this highly above the rest by the industry. Yes, stuff can change, and I want to make that very clear. We have no clue. This time last year, or even maybe a little before this time, Jace Laviolette was projected to be the first overall pick and ended up being in the 20s in the draft. This is a different tier of player, I think, and I think most people would say that. A lot can change. With that said, Rock Chalowski is the top player on everybody's draft board right now. It's hard to deny that. He's coming off of a season at UCLA that was truly special in the whole meanings of the word. I mean, this is a guy who can be a plus defender at shortstop in addition to having unbelievable raw power, really refined hit tool for a guy who is a power bat. It's just a guy who it's hard to say anybody else at the top of this board right now. And I don't think the White Sox really shied away from that. Chris Getz mentioned he was asked kind of about just being able to focus on a select few players instead of a top pick. This is when we were talking to him after the draft, after the lottery. And he said, it's a little more efficient, right? You're able to kind of talk about how the draft works and, how it works. Teams are able to move things around based on pool space. You can drag guys down. But he kind of said, when there is a clear number one and if the team does see it that way, it becomes logistically easier. And that to me signals in my head, like, we are looking at all options. And when it comes down to it, if we have a guy we want, we're not going to not get him because of funky financial situations. I think they're going to be willing to do what it takes if they have a guy they think is a clear number one, which right now on December 10th is Rock Chalowski.
Yeah, I mean, you could make a case for Rock Chalowski being the best college shortstop prospect since Dansby Swanson. You could make a case for him being the best college shortstop prospect in the past 2 decades. Like, Chalowski is very good. Like, I don't want to undersell him just by talking about Grady Emerson or whoever else, but Rock Chalowski probably would have gone 1-1 in this past year's draft if he was eligible. Like, I don't even think that that's much of a question. Like, this past draft was, yeah, it was all right, but the top of this year's draft is just so much better than what it was last year, and I think the White Sox know that, and they're gonna do their due diligence with scouting everybody. But yeah, from this chair right now on December 10th, I don't think that they're even I don't want to say not considering, but like, they know it's going to be Rock, and maybe Grady Emerson makes a late push with a good spring, and maybe Chalowski tapers off in his junior season. But the fact is, Chalowski's his skill set, his ability, it's all there, and I don't think that the White Sox are going to be too dissuaded from taking him. Let's say he doesn't come out and perform like he did last year in this upcoming college season, then the case would be made that maybe Grady Emerson is the pick. But right now, I think Chalowski will still be the pick, even on July 11th, 12th, whatever the first round is.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that at all. But I think
Yeah.
it's important to recognize that the organization is doing their due diligence. And people got this. This is another. I want to read a quote here from Mike Shirley, and I think people read this the wrong way, in my opinion. Shirley was asked just about immediately, of course, was asked about Chalowski. He said, "Rock's a good player. I do think he's earned the right to be on that leaderboard, but we have a long way to go. He's got to continue to refine his skills, as all players do leading up to the draft. He's a great player." He proceeded to talk about how they've watched him since high school, which is interesting to me because I didn't actually know that. He said, we spent a lot of time on him in high school, felt like he was worthy of being a high end pick at that point. So I do feel like we know the kid, we know the family, and we know the talent. That to me says we are going to look at everyone. This is also a player that we've known is very good for years now. So that means, and that's, you can say the same thing about like Jaden Fauske, for example, this past draft. The White Sox had watched Jaden Fauske for years because Jim Thome has been helping out with the NAS baseball program and has seen what Jaden Fauske is for years. So this is a guy that's on their radar. He was on everybody's radar, but the White Sox know the type of talent they're dealing with here. They understand, they're aware of that. And that doesn't mean they're not going to look at other options in the next 8 months. Obviously, come January 15th, when the scouting window opens up again, they're going to do their due diligence on other guys. Chalowski sits at the top of the board right now. Couple other college names to mention because there is other college guys that are very high end guys. AJ Gracia, outfielder at Virginia, is a guy who has a lot of hype right now. Drew Burress, this time a year ago, was looked at as the clear 1-1 potentially after his freshman year. Drew Burress is an outfielder from Georgia Tech, another potential option there. There's a couple other high school or college players I think could be in play. Cameron Flukie is the one pitcher that comes to mind. I'm not sure there's another pitcher I think could be a 1-1 guy. Flukie out of Coastal Carolina is a funky 6'6" righty, super interesting arm, and a guy that I think will be a top 5 pick come July. On the prep side of the board, I think the Grady Emerson, who we mentioned, is the clear top prep guy at this current moment. Just Baseball has him at number 1, and Tyler Jennings, who does an amazing job doing our draft stuff, has made it clear that that's the clear one on the prep board. Right now, prep stuff can change even more drastically than college stuff because these guys are so young. They're still just really developing. Really, 17-year. These are 17-year-old kids. Like at the end of the day, like these guys can change. So Grady Emerson is the top prep name. There's a couple of others. Second on the Just Baseball board, and this is one that is definitely not the consensus number 2. Second on the Just Baseball board is Carson Boleman, who's a funky left-hander, White Sox kind of makeup, right? A guy from South Carolina committed to Wake Forest. Definitely a little White Soxy type of pick, but I think there's probably hesitancy to do that after some recent draft picks. A couple other high school guys, Jacob Lombard, obviously younger brother of George Lombard Jr., a guy that's gotten a lot of hype. Blake Bowen has gotten really starting to rise up draft boards as well, outfielder from California. So there's a lot of really good players in this draft. Somebody mentioned Justin LeBron in the chat, falling a bit on some draft boards, but a guy, Alabama shortstop, who is still up there as well. So a lot of talent at the top of this draft, but obviously there is a favorite right now, and that can still change.
Yeah, and I think the White Sox, if they didn't go out and scout everybody and try and get their best option, I don't think that would be right. And the MLB draft is so funky with all of the signing bonus and pool money. You can be able to say that you're not going to take a player up until or you can say publicly that, oh yeah, we're exploring all our options, but then when that day comes, you run the card up to the podium because you knew all along that you were going to do that. And part of that is negotiation for that lower money. Teams are going to be trying to save as much money in that top of the first round, just because those slot values are so big that you're able to just get more and more and more money off of that pick and then use it later. So I think that the White Sox are going to basically try and sign Rock Chalowski at the cheapest cost possible. And, we're not going to hear officially that Rock Chalowski was the clear-cut number 1 overall pick until after the pick has been made and Chris Getz and Mike Shirley and all of them are talking to the media. And they were like, yeah, we've known since we won the lottery back in December that Rock was going to be our guy. So I think on, what was it? It would be July 13th that we hear from them. I think that's what they're going to say come July 13th.
No, I'm with you there. I definitely would agree. I think that there's still stuff that can happen, but it does seem clear the organization is aware of how talented Chalowski is. They're excited about this pick, and I really think people should realize and recognize. And I know people do, but I think the bonus pool aspect is an intricate element of baseball that's not like any other sport.
Right.
I think it's not more obviously the first pick is the most important angle of this, but that's a very, very important second aspect of winning this lottery. The difference between the bonus pool, if the White Sox would have fallen to the 5th pick or something in the lottery from having the first odds, which is possible. It's always possible, right? They would have even the 4th pick, right? That's millions of dollars less that you have at your hands. I don't know if you have it on hand from last draft, what the difference is. And I know you're pulling that up right now,
yeah,
but that's the difference. That changes the way you approach a draft. It changes the way you approach how the White Sox might have extra money to go take a high school kid in the 11th round when they realize, oh crap, we have more money than we expected. And they're able to go and snag a high school kid in the back half of the draft, right? They could be able to attack, maybe the 2nd round, they lose out on some guys that don't want to get bought down and they just want to go 1st round. So they say, oh, we're going to punt to the 3rd round, but we're going to drag an early 2nd rounder all the way down to the 3rd round, right? Because we have that extra money still from those first 2 picks. It really creates an interesting angle. And that's something I'm going to be super excited to check out as the season progresses, because there's a lot of ways you can use that overage. There's a lot of ways you can use that bonus pool to maximize this draft. Another part of that that's important to mention, the record for a first overall pick is 9.4 million, I believe, is the record all time for a first overall pick signing bonus. The slot value will be over 11 million for the first overall pick. So as much as you think Chalowski is a slam dunk, even the best prospect ever isn't getting 1.5 million more than the record ever. So
Right.
if Cholowski breaks the record by 1 million, the White Sox will still then have 800,000, give or take, to play with in later rounds. So not only do you have a shot to reasonably, and maybe it even ends up being more, maybe he just dominates college and it literally blows the highest record out of the water, they will still have money to play with after that, very likely. So it's a really cool situation because you have the opportunity to not get cheap at all, to get the best player in the draft that you want, and to still be able to have some money to play around in the second or third round. Another angle of that is like I would not be surprised at all to see the White Sox target a comp pick in the draft or in
Yeah.
this offseason because comp picks are the only picks that can be traded. So for those who don't know, teams get comp picks in exchange for their qualifying offer to free agents that sign with another team. So Zach Gallen, for example, if Zach Gallen is to sign because the D-backs offered a qualifying offer to Zach Gallen, he didn't sign with the Cubs, by the way. Sorry, Cubs fans.
Yeah.
But the thing that you're able to say with that is like if Zach Gallen leaves the D-backs and they get a comp pick that'll be after the first round, it'll be comp A actually for Zach Gallen. That pick increases the bonus pool by a lot, and it's an extra draft pick. The White Sox, you got to be thinking about that. And then there's also comp B picks. There's going to be a lot of other comp B picks that come after the second round. Even if it's after the second round, and the White Sox, that was the Blake Larson pick 2 years ago, was a comp B pick for reference. So that came from that situation, right? So if you're able to get another pick somehow from a trade this offseason and add even more money, then you're in an even better spot than you already are. And I think that's very possible because there is a couple players in the White Sox that might not command a large return on the market, but they're able to bring in a comp pick from a team that doesn't necessarily see an asset. The first asset that comes to mind for me is Lenyn Sosa. I think Lenyn Sosa is a good player. He really had an incredible breakout season this past year, showed that he can be a big league player. I don't think teams are going to look at Lenyn Sosa as someone they want to trade legitimate prospect capital for, but maybe they see Lenyn Sosa as someone they're okay trading a draft pick for a team that already might have a decently low slot. They don't necessarily need that extra pick. They don't have as big of a bonus pool already, and they see Lenyn Sosa as someone who can slot into their roster and become an everyday player, or even a strong side platoon player for them, right? That's where the White Sox, I would be all over that possibility because that just gives you even then some from the already what would be the highest bonus pool in the draft.
Yeah, while we're on the topic of comp picks, the Orioles had the highest bonus pool of any team in last year's draft, $19.1 million. The next highest was the Mariners at 17. So the Orioles had, I want to say, four top 43 picks, which 43 was the end of the first round due to all the prospect promotion picks and the competitive balance picks. So yeah, they picked 19th with their actual first round pick. They had the 30th and 31st overall pick. Those were compensation for Corbin Burns and Anthony Santander. And then they also acquired the 37th overall pick from the Rays in a trade. So those four picks alone made up like about 80% of their bonus pool. But then, we were talking about like the difference between the first overall pick and then the fifth overall pick in terms of bonus or in terms of slot value. The Nationals slot value this year was 11 million. It's basically dead on 11 million. And then the fifth pick, which went to the Cardinals last year, was 8.1 million. So nearly $3 million less if the White Sox were to fall to the fifth pick. But, thankfully they didn't. They were able to get that top overall pick. And now I think that, Elijah, you were dead on when you said the White Sox are going to try and target, a comp pick, whatever, to raise that bonus pool and have more money to throw around, because there's a lot of different, like I said, a lot of different ways that you can attack this right now. But if you have even more money flexibility, it just gets even better. And, more picks in a better draft is always good. There's something to be said about this current White Sox team having the players that they have up right now. Colson Montgomery, Kyle Teal, Edgar Caro, whoever you want to say is part of that next core. If you can supplement them with 3 top 50 picks, that's a really good thing. And the White Sox they've been doing really, I don't want to say really well, but like the top end of the drafts, I feel like they've hit home runs in each of the last 3 or 4 maybe. Like, there's a lot of things to like about the White Sox drafting, especially at the top recently. And I think that we could see a comp pick being traded because, like I said, the more money you have to throw around, it's
Yeah.
just going to be better in this year's draft.
Yeah.
And I think Ian said something in the chat. Like the Giants, like any team at the top, they can offer as much money as they want to Rock Chalowski, and that's going to be something that maybe the White Sox have to keep in the back of their minds. Is
Yeah.
like, all right, yeah, if let's say the Twins want to throw their entire bonus pool at just at Rock Chalowski,
Yeah. It's interesting.
what's to say they won't?
My gauge, and this is again completely speculative. This is not me having any insider info or anything here, but like my gauge is that the Rays and Twins are less likely to do that. The
Yeah,
team that climbed from what was it, 15th best odds to fourth is the Giants that Ian mentioned there.
yeah.
The Giants are desperate for star power. The Giants have been desperate for
I
star
mean,
power.
so are the Twins.
The Twins are too, but I think from an organizational standpoint, the Twins are a little bit more calculated with their drafts. The Giants are the type of team that I could see with that fourth pick slot value trying to just basically punt their next 3 draft picks for the sake of trying to throw as much as they can at Rock Chalowski. I could see that. I don't think that report of the 11 to 13 million was accurate. I don't think that was even a real reporter, honestly. But I do think that's possible. So the White Sox have to be prepared for that. If you need to go above and beyond, like Get said, it becomes easier if you think there's a clear guy at the top. If they get to the draft and there is a clear person that they want and they have the first pick, nobody can take the player from them if they give the right deal, right? They're going to throw a bag and they're going to make it happen. I really, really don't think anybody offers over the slot value of the first pick because it's already so high. With that said, I think they're going to get their guy. That's what I'll say.
Yeah.
I don't want to take too long. I know this is a quick hitter, but any other thoughts on the draft before we talk about the 2 Rule 5 draft picks?
No, we're going to be talking about the draft for 8 months, so we can push all of our thoughts later.
I know this weekend, Ian and James are coming soon in the next few weeks. I know Ian and James are going to have Tyler Jennings on, who's our director of our head of amateur scouting for Just Baseball, who really does incredible work. He has 50 players for both the prep and college board already up, and it's December. He's going to have his top 200 overall in the draft coming out like fairly soon. I think he's an animal. He's just cranking through this draft class and has seen a lot. So we're going to have a lot of draft coverage. Don't worry about that. Other thing I want to plug before we get into Rule 5, make sure you're keeping up with us on socials. Our guy Adrian White was out with me in Arizona. That was me. I keep hearing Arizona. That was me in Orlando at the winter meetings. And he's taking over our socials a little bit for FutureSox. We've got an Instagram going. If you don't follow FutureSox, we were back on Instagram after 4.5 years of no Instagram activity. We're back at FutureSox on Instagram. Obviously, the Twitter is where we do a lot of our White Sox content. So at FutureSox as well on the Twitter side of things. We're going to be doing a lot more content on social media in general. So make sure you're checking out Adrian too. Adrian White Sox on Twitter. He's doing a great job for us, and I'm really starting to put out some more written and social media content for FutureSox. Rule 5 stuff. This was interesting, man, because I mean, being there today, like we heard a bunch of names. I was having names thrown out left and right of just like, oh, this name, this name, this name. I hadn't heard Jedickson Paez once. So that should tell you all you need to know about the Rule 5 draft. The Rule 5 draft is throwing darts at a board and hoping that it hits. And that's just, it's just one of those things where you're kind of just seeing what happens. And I want to temper everyone's expectations because I think coming into this week, White Sox fans are looking at it as, oh, you've got Shane Smith again. Let's get another Shane Smith. That happens once in a generation.
Yeah.
I would never expect to see a Shane Smith again, maybe for another 20 years. Maybe. You never know. Baseball talent is higher than ever right now in baseball, especially on the pitching side. There's guys that just figure something out and they absolutely pop. We've seen that plenty recently. That can always happen, but I would never expect a Shane Smith from the Rule 5 draft. Obviously an exceptional pick, but don't expect it. With that said, not anybody we were necessarily expecting. Jedickson Paez is an interesting name to just kind of follow up in here because it's not someone I had on my board of Rule 5 guys that were an option. 21-year-old who has never thrown above high A. Both Rule 5 picks actually have never thrown above high A, which is incredibly interesting. And I think that the White Sox viewed this Rule 5, particularly given the status of the organization, given that they have the first overall pick, as an opportunity to just swing for the fences and see what happens. And swing for the maximum upside, knowing they still have a bunch of 40-man spots open. They're going to add a couple free agents. It does sound like, especially on the hitting side now, that the White Sox are still going to make some additions. They're not going to be the sexy additions that some people might want. They're going to add, though. So first pick, second overall pick in the Rule 5, only 13 players were taken, first of all, in the major leagues out of the Rule 5 draft because you have to commit time to keep someone on your roster for the whole season, have a plan for how you're going to keep them on your roster for the whole season when they haven't pitched in the big leagues. So it's a really weird situation. Jedickson Paez goes first, 21-year-old pitcher from the Red Sox organization, only threw 19 innings this past season. But in 2024, split between low A and high A, 96 and two-thirds innings of a 3.1 ER, 3.17 ERA with a strikeout rate in the, a strikeout rate at the, where is it? A strikeout rate nearing 30% and a 3% walk rate. The
Yeah.
first thing when I was looking at him that stood out to me is the fact that he had 113 strikeouts and 12 walks in his first full professional season. He played in, I guess, his second full professional season, but his first professional season over 90 innings. He had 113 strikeouts and 12 walks. That was the first thing for me. A little bit of context on Paez. This is a guy who definitely is going to take some time, and I think the White Sox view it as a project who they can kind of manipulate and take it easy with the way they utilize him in 2026, with the aim of him being a starter eventually. Obviously, you're asking a lot of any pitcher coming from high A to the big leagues, of
Right.
course. But they see him as a guy with a lot of different pitches, a guy who can really kind of be able to adjust his arsenal, be able to tweak with it a little bit. The command is elite. It's something you can really dream on there. And they view him as a long-term starter. For now, right, 19 innings this past season, he's going to be used very cautiously and gets made that clear immediately, saying that they're going to be careful with his innings. They're going to have to get creative with it. Mentioned Mike Vassell as just an example of how to be creative with innings usage. I expect Paez will be even more cautiously used than Vassell, hypothetically.
Yeah, he was out for about 3 months or the majority of 2025 because of a calf injury,
Yeah,
but he threw to a 2.79 ERA. Granted, it was only 19 innings in April and then in August.
yeah,
But yeah, you mentioned the control. It's probably some of the best of maybe any Rule 5 eligible pitcher, not even just the 13 that were drafted. But yeah, it's not a lot of like crazy stuff. Like
right.
he's got a 5 pitch mix: a fastball, curveball, sweeper, slider, changeup. The changeup is his best pitch. That's been like his bread and butter all throughout his career. And yeah, he's not going to overpower you. It's a 91 to 92 mile an hour fastball. Um, yeah, you hope that he can, get back into being fully healthy, maybe add a couple ticks of velocity here and there. And, like you said, it's a lottery ticket, and being able to swing for the fences on, somebody who hasn't thrown above high A, that if he sticks, great. If he doesn't, oh no. Like he was a 21-year-old who hadn't pitched above high A, and you were gonna get him for free if he does go out and shove. But there's a lot of things about Paez where I'm like, yeah, if he sticks on a team that is desperate for that sort of like bulk relief slash
Yeah.
opener type of innings, there's a lot to like there because, we've seen guys like Sean Burke getting like he was great when he had an opener and he wasn't the best when he didn't have one. So if he can be an opener for Sean Burke, I would kind of be here for it.
Yeah, I'm interested. So what I gauged from today, and this is just me kind of putting some things together in my head. Like, it seems to me like it's very clear the starter is the goal for a guy
Right.
like Paez. Right off the gate, I don't think it's a full starter. He obviously can't handle a starter workload at this point in there, and they're going to be cautious with him because they see him as a high upside 21-year-old who
Yeah.
just threw 19 innings right this past season. So they're going to be careful. I think the White Sox are going to get really creative with their usage of openers. It seems to me like they really preferred Sean Burke down the stretch behind an opener. Grant
Mhm.
Taylor is a guy that they've made it clear they're going to be in the bullpen, but in a multi-inning role, hopefully. So I see Paez in kind of this unique opener role potentially, even if he's following an opener or being the opener himself. I think he's going to get a lot of variety of outings that come in that 2-3 inning opener role, or he follows an opener if Vassell decides to open some games. So they have Taylor open a couple games and then Paez follows, right? I think you're going to see him making 3 to 4 inning appearances this season. I don't think he's going to be making 5+ inning games. I also don't think he's going to be a 1 inning guy. And it's definitely clear I don't think they view him as a 1 inning guy. So it's going to be some combination of 2 to 4 inning outings for Paez, either as an opener, sometimes at the bullpen, sometimes. Really unique situation. There's a chance this guy gets sent back, realistically. And that's what happens with any Rule 5 pick. Last year, there was 2 Rule 5 picks that made it through last year. I'm pretty sure it was just that
I
drafted by
think it was.
their original team last year. Shane Smith and Liam Hicks, I'm pretty sure, are the only 2 that spent the whole season and stayed
Yeah.
with the organization. So it's not common, right? Obviously, it's not common. Vassell was traded for it because the Mets, he traded from after the Rule 5 draft. White Sox acquired him. They end up keeping him. So they've now, acquired Shane Smith and Vassell officially after keeping them the whole season. Paez is a guy that I do think may end up getting sent back because there's so much risk of a guy being 21 coming from high A.
Yeah.
But if he does stick, it's going to be in this kind of funky Swiss Army knife role where he could then hopefully be a starter in the future if he remains with the organization past this year.
Yeah, it's a project pick, and you said it a couple like at the beginning. He's 21. Like the fact that he's going to be 21 and pitching in the big leagues, like it's something that White Sox fans haven't seen a lot. Like who was the youngest pitcher for the White Sox this year? Grant Taylor, right? He was
Yeah.
23, I want to say.
Yeah, I guess so. There might have
So
been
yeah,
something else, but yeah.
Paez is 2 full years younger than him. It's going to be a long road if Paez does stick with the team. But the White Sox have time. Like it's not like they're going out and competing for a World Series this year. It would be great if they did, but in all reality, they're not going to. So if you can throw a couple darts at the board and maybe one finds the bullseye, that's awesome. That's what the Rule 5 draft is about. And they hit the bullseye last year with Shane Smith. Maybe it doesn't have to be the bullseye this year. Maybe it can be a 20 or a 19. But like the point is, Rule 5 drafts or Rule 5 draft picks aren't supposed to be Shane Smith. They're
Right.
supposed to be these sort of versatile utility man slash like primary reliever. But if Paez can get stretched out into a starter, I think he could be a pretty funky one, because you look at guys like Mason Adams, who thankfully was not selected in the Rule 5 draft. We'll get to somebody who was in a minute. But yeah, like Mason Adams and Paez, in my opinion, it's just like mirror image of one another. Paez is a lefty, Adams is a righty. Granted, Adams probably has better breaking stuff, and I don't want to say like close to similar command, but like how many walks did you say he had? 12 walks in 100
12
innings.
in 96 innings, 12
Yeah,
walks.
no, that's crazy. I don't know what Mason Adams's
It's a little
was.
higher than that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say something. So it was probably in like 30s, but which is
Three
still great.
3.1%, dude. 3.1%
Yeah,
walk rate. That's
yeah,
that's
no,
Shane Murphy stuff
yeah,
and better stuff,
that's
frankly,
crazy.
right? Like that's that was the first thing that stood out to me, honestly. And I
Yeah,
do think that's why the White Sox view him as a guy who throws 5 pitches, has a deep arsenal, really able to locate all of his pitches. There's a ton of risk with this pick, of course. But I don't mind the idea of just taking a swing at upside and taking a swing at a guy who you think even could be a good starter in the future. It's the Rule 5 draft at the end of the day. Like, I get it. People want to see, oh, this is a big league and contributor immediately. And like, maybe RJ Pettit is a stud for the Rockies and he becomes their closer. And like, that's great. He went first overall in the Rule 5 draft. Like, that's awesome. But this is the type of situation you take a swing, especially with the White Sox being in kind of this stage 2 now of this rebuild. I'm okay with taking swings in this. And the bigger swing, even more, right, in terms of the type of player, was in the second round. The only team to take a second rounder in the Rule 5 draft was Alexander Alberto of the Rays organization, 24-year-old, just turned 24 recently. So we'll be going 24 in the next season. 6'8" right-hander who's up to 100, didn't make it above high A again, but 42 and 2/3 or 48 and 2/3 innings of 2.5 ERA ball with a strikeout rate at above 30%. Walk rate's a little high, definitely some command issues, but this guy throws fuzz. Alexander
mhm.
Alberto throws fuzz. So this is a guy that even from talking gets his presser after big time stuff, unique pitch with his slider, a guy that they think can be a back end bullpen guy if things click well for him. They were kind of like, yeah, he hasn't pitched above the upper levels, doesn't have a ton of innings, but his stuff in short spurts can stack up against pretty much any hitter. Yes, somebody said this in the comment. I am definitely going to mix up Alexander Alberto and Alexander Albertus. I'm for sure
Well,
going to mess
one actually exists.
Right. One doesn't exist. That is a good point.
Yeah,
This is a guy who they're going to just let fire away. And I'm
yeah.
excited to see it because it's primarily 2 pitches and he's just going to throw fuzz and do it for 1 inning. And that's going to be that. And you're going to see if it works. And yeah, he's 6'8", he's 24. So like that sounds appealing. He doesn't have any upper level experience, but the stuff is gross
Exactly.
and he's going to be used purely as a fire away for an inning reliever, and we'll see what happens because those are the types of guys that could click. You won't know, right? This is a guy that could just click and become a really solid reliever for the future for the White Sox. Or the command might not come along. He might get sent back in May, and that happens, right?
His command actually isn't. It's not horrible. The walk rate is a bit high, but the fastball command is. It's not horrible. Like he was a 56.1% zone rate on the fastball, which I'm reading something right here that said he touched 101.4, which is unreal. And the thing that sticks out to me is his extension. He gets almost 7 feet of extension down the mound, and that's something that we've seen Brian Bannister target in pitchers, where big guys can get down the mound and it makes 60 feet 6 inches look like 48 feet. But Alberto is somebody who I think can stick with the White Sox only because it's so much easier to hide a Rule 5 pick in the bullpen. We've talked about it before on the show. If Alberto throws twice a week, once a week, and then you look up it's June or July and you already have him for his
Yes.
entire 6 years of control. Like it's very much more possible that Alberto sticks with the White Sox rather than Paez. And,
Yeah.
for all we know, both or neither could. But Alberto is really fun, and I hope he gets a shot at being, that third flame throwing righty with him, Grant Taylor, and Jordan Leisure, because those three in the back end of a bullpen that would be pretty fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I'm curious to see if there's any adjustments or additions to
But yeah,
Alberto's arsenal. Clearly
it
a
sounds like it's
pronator,
it's
right?
it,
He's very
it sounds like
clearly a
it's
guy
just
who
cutter slider right now.
yeah,
The cut
it looks like there
fastball.
is a fastball. There's a slightly more of a four seam versa cutter, but they do seem to
Mhm.
blend into each other at
Right.
times. So I'm curious to kind of look at that. I mean, Getz particularly mentioned the cutter being a really high velocity, sharp cutter. I want to dive into it more. Definitely a guy who pronates because there's nothing going arm side for him. It's all glove side stuff, but it's all sharp glove side stuff. It's not really like deep stuff, right? So for reference, I mean, everything's coming out of this similar slot for him, right? It's coming out of this upward slot where he's rotating on top of the ball. He gets on top of it well, and it's kind of the sharp daggers. Any of his pitches, right? Even the slider is kind of still pretty sharp. If the White Sox can see what to do exactly with that pitch and just kind of separating the velocities even maybe a little bit more. Maybe the slider becomes a little bit deeper, gets a little bit into a little bit slower, but a little more depth to it. Then you get a little more ride on the fastball potentially. And maybe there's a changeup or splitter added into this mix. I wouldn't be shocked. With that said, like you can hide a 2 to 3 pitch guy in the bullpen and just let him throw absolute fuzz and see what happens. This is a guy that I just like. I don't think there's that much to it. I think it's just big dude
You
throws
throw
hard.
hard. Yeah.
Let's see what happens. If these types of guys can easily become high end relievers, so I like the pick. I thought they were going to take 2 arms today. They took 2 arms today. The only other thing I was curious about is like, do you take an outfielder? Like a little part of me was like, you could have tried to swing for an outfielder. I think ultimately the outfield edition comes free of free agency. I think there's still an outfielder on the way in the free agent market. So interesting picks for sure. Do have to mention before we just wrap up here with a couple small things. The you know the unfortunate part of the Rule 5 draft, you get 2 pitchers, but you lose one. We
Yeah.
said 2 weeks ago when it wasn't protected in the 40 man that Peyton Paulette was gone. I,
Yeah.
I I thought there was very little chance of him sticking around. I've talked to many people who thought there was a very high chance of him getting taken because it's a funky fours arm slot. The fastball is very unique. I was talking to Aram late in a few days ago, and he was telling me how there's only like 6 pitchers in the big leagues with more IVB from as low of an angle or from the type of angle that Paulette has. So it's a funky mix. He's got a plus changeup. He's got multiple breaking balls. Paulette's a guy that I thought was going to be in the bigs in September. And the fact
Yeah.
that he wasn't in the bigs in September, I guess, was the writing on the wall to an extent, right? Because I thought he was getting out of the 40 man. He was going to be up in September and we'd see him on the roster for all of 2026. That was kind of my assumption last season, honestly. Clearly didn't debut in September, didn't get out of the 40 man, and now he's gone. Really hurts that it's the Guardians. I won't lie. It really hurts that it's the Guardians because not only is that a very, very good organization when it comes to developing players, it's in the division. If Peyton Paulette reaches his ceiling, he's going to be doing it against the White Sox many times a year. And that's going to suck because that's a guy we drafted in the second round. It's a guy that we've been fans of for a while, a very talented pitcher, a good guy. I've had some great conversations with him. It's a bummer. It's a bummer. And that happens. And Getz was like, yeah, we knew there was a chance he was going to get taken going into this, and he did, and that happens. And we have 2 other pitchers that are in the fold, and that's going to happen. That's part of the Rule 5 draft. I still struggle to see not protecting him, to be honest with you. With that said, like, let's see what the rest of these roster spots are. Let's see what happens the rest of the offseason. If there's another veteran reliever that gets added and you added K, you added Alberto, you added Paez, and there's 1 or 2 more signings on the pitching side, okay. I can understand to a degree what's going on there. If there's no more changes on the pitching side and the only adds are on the offensive side, I still think Peyton Paulette could be one of the best guys, 8 guys in the bullpen, and that is a little confusing to me.
Yeah, it sucks. And like you said, the fact that if he does stick with the Guardians and develop into his ceiling, it's going to be against the White Sox. And that sucks
Yeah.
because, we've seen him just absolutely carve guys up in the minor leagues, especially after getting moved to the bullpen and, finding success. It was a really, really fun story for a guy who didn't have a lot of success as a starter, and then seemed to really find something in the bullpen. And it just sucks. Like Paulette, in my opinion, yeah, should have debuted in September, and if he didn't debut in September, definitely should have been added to the 40 man in, like, what was it, 3 weeks ago. Like
Right.
it's tough to lose him, but thankfully he was the only name that the White Sox lost. I don't have the full list of eligible names in front of me, but I know Ben Peoples didn't get picked, Shane Murphy didn't get picked, Mason Adams didn't get picked. So
Right.
like those were like the four that we were kind of mainly
Mentioning, yep,
focusing
yep,
on.
yep. So yeah, it's interesting. It happens. It happens. I
Yeah.
wish Peyton Blood nothing but the best. I hate that
Mhm.
it's going to be for the Guardians. That part sucks the most. I think the fact that it's in division team who's particularly good at developing young pitching, that makes it hurt a little more. But we'll see. We'll see what happens with Paulette, and from there, there are two more pitchers to keep an eye on. Obviously, we're going to be doing our Future Sox rankings here in a couple months. So in February or so, we're going to have our ranking, and I definitely think Paez is going to slide into the top 30. I don't personally tend to rank relievers. I do think Alberto is probably one of the highest upside relievers in the system now instantly, as much as I don't tend to rank relievers in general, just because I think it's really hard to value enough a pure reliever. But we shall see. So two interesting guys to keep an eye on. Any final thoughts here? I want to just reel this another comment about the shortstops. Guys, I just don't worry about the positions. Just please don't worry. It's fine.
Good baseball players are good baseball players, no matter the position.
Baseball players that hit nukes and mash and can find a defensive home, it's okay. Let's continue to stack talent. That is more important. I cannot emphasize enough talent above position. I mean, half the players you see in the big leagues were playing shortstop in high school. We're playing shortstop as growing up in travel ball, right? Shortstop and center fielders are the majority of high end players that in their childhood growing up getting to the major leagues. We'll be fine. Focus on the talent.
Yeah,
That's all I got.
yeah, no, it's gonna be fun. Like the White Sox future took a very much positive upswing in the past 26 hours. Like the White Sox, they could roll out 9 shortstops for all I care. That would be
Amazing.
fine.
Perfect.
That would be fine.
Perfect. Wonderful. 9 shortstops. Wonderful. Sign me up.
Who cares? Like the
Yeah.
fact that you could have a infield and some in the outfield of shortstops. That's a good thing. Shortstops, nine
Yeah.
times out of 10, are the most athletic guys on the field. And if the White Sox, like I said, if the White Sox have 9 of them on the field at the same time, I'm fine with that, because
Right.
that means that all of them are athletic and all of them are probably good enough. Like
Yep.
it's going to be fine. And the White Sox we're trending up, and it's going to be really fun in the next 2-3 years. I just hold on a little bit longer.
Yep. 100%. If you're listening live on YouTube, stick around in 25
Yes.
minutes for hot takes and heaters. We've got just abundance of White Sox content because this has been a fun week. Winter meetings is a blast. I had an amazing time. If anybody met me at winter meetings and we were able to talk, thank you for saying what's up. It was a great time, honestly. Got to meet so many baseball people. Really had a fun time chopping it up and just being diving into that world. So yeah, stick around for hot takes and heaters in 20 minutes. If you're listening on audio, make sure you're following Dylan at Not Cease, myself at Elijah EV8, and at FutureSox as well. We'll talk to you guys soon. I don't know how soon, but like probably pretty soon, because I want to keep talking about this team right now. It's got me excited, and I think we're at a point in the offseason where it's fun to talk and it's fun to get excited. So we'll do some free agency talk. I definitely have some additional notes on the other kind of things going on in the organization, free agency, other stuff coming soon, and we'll talk to you guys next week or sometime soon